What if everything we think we know about getting old is just wrong? Today, we're diving into a guide to aging well that's 2,000 years old. It wasn't written by some modern self-help guru, but by the brilliant Roman statesman and philosopher Cicero. So let's see what he had to say.
Let's be honest. For a lot of us, the answer is a big yes, right? We're kind of taught to see old age as this time of decline, of loss, of being pushed to the sidelines. It's this deep anxiety that's been around for, centuries.
But Cicero said no. Not just no, but he argued that old age can actually be one of the best parts of your life. And the key, he said, wasn't about having good luck or great genes. It was about having the right philosophy.
So, here's how he builds his case. He takes on the 4 biggest complaints, or what he calls charges, that people level against old age. His plan? To dismantle these fears one by one and show us the true potential of our later years. Let's walk through them.
Okay, so let's start with the first and probably the biggest charge. This fear that as we get older, we're just removed from all the important stuff. That we become useless, inactive.
Cicero puts it really simply. This is the fear that all the important work in the world is a game for the young, and that older people are just left with no real role to play anymore. But here's where Cicero completely flips the script. He says, sure, you might lose some physical strength, but you trade it for something way more valuable: wisdom, judgment, and authority. The greatest things in the world, he argues, aren't achieved with muscle, but with the mind. And he uses this fantastic analogy to make his point. Picture a big ship. You've got the young guys providing the raw power, pulling the oars, but who's doing the most important job? It's the old, experienced helmsman at the back, using his mind, his wisdom, to steer the whole ship to safety. That, Cicero says, is exactly how society should work. Okay, so the mind gets stronger, more authoritative. But what about the body? This brings us to the second fear, and this is one you really can't argue with. The body does get weaker as we age. So how does Cicero deal with the charge of being frail and weak?
He doesn't even try to deny it. He totally admits that the body loses strength. But his response is so practical. He basically says, so what? The point isn't to sit around mourning the strength you had when you were 20. The point is to wisely use the strength you have right now.
Cicero points out that strength has always been a relative thing. A young man isn't as strong as a bull, but he doesn't despair about it, right? He just works with what he's got. And more importantly, our real power is in our mind, which, if you keep exercising it, doesn't have to decline at all. He even gives us this real-world example of a king named Massanica, who at 90 years old was still leading his kingdom, full of energy. The goal is just to live well, according to your own nature, whatever stage you're in.
All right, so we've covered the mind and the body, but what about just fun? This leads us to the third charge, and it's a huge one. The fear that old age is this passionless, joyless time where all the intense pleasures of youth are gone for good. And Cicero's answer here is just brilliant. He doesn't even use his own words. He pulls out this incredible line from the Greek playwright Sophocles. When someone asked Sophocles if he missed the passions of his youth, he said he was glad to have escaped them, like escaping a savage and furious master. Wow. See how that just completely reframes the entire problem? Cicero argues that what we think of as a loss is actually a liberation. By freeing us from the constant nagging pull of those passions, old age actually clears the way for deeper, more meaningful kinds of pleasure. So what are these superior pleasures? Well, they're the pleasures of the mind, the pure joy of a great conversation, the satisfaction of learning something new, the quiet delight of, say, tending a garden and just watching things grow. These are pleasures that don't fade away. In fact, they get richer with time. And what's amazing is that modern science completely backs this up. Lifelong learning and engagement are absolutely key to a healthy, happy brain.
And that brings us to the final and, let's face it, the heaviest charge against old age. Its unavoidable closeness to death. This is the ultimate fear, the one that sits behind all the others.
Now to tackle this one, Cicero sets philosophy aside for a moment and becomes a cold, hard logician. He argues that if you just think it through, step by step, being afraid of death is completely illogical, no matter what you believe happens after. Okay, so here's his logic. It's like a fork in the road. Path 1, the soul dies with the body. If that's the case, death is just nothingness, and you can't be afraid of nothing. Path 2, the soul's immortal. Well, then death isn't an end at all. It's just a doorway to a better existence, something to be welcomed. So either way you slice it, he argues, fear just doesn't make any sense.
And he finishes this point with just a beautiful metaphor. He says, for a person who has lived a full life, death isn't some violent thing. It's like a ripe piece of fruit, which, when its time has come, just falls gently and naturally from the tree. It's the peaceful, timely end to a life well lived.
So, after taking apart all four of these great fears, Cicero brings everything home with one central, powerful idea, the concept that our later years are a kind of harvest.
And here it is, the ultimate message of his whole work. A happy, fulfilling old age doesn't just happen to you. It's not an accident of fate. It is the direct result, the natural harvest of the seeds you plant throughout your entire life. Seeds of learning, of virtue, of good habits, and of good relationships.
In the end, he says, life is kind of like a play. And if we've played our part well, we shouldn't try to cling to the stage when the final act is over. The reward for a life well lived is being able to exit gracefully, feeling satisfied and without any regrets.
And so this ancient wisdom leaves us with a really profound question that just echoes across 2,000 years. If a good old age is something we earn, something we build for ourselves, what are we planting right now for our own harvest?